All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode. You're listening to SHEDCAST, the shed hunting podcast for all things shed hunting. Today with us, we got Charles McFarland, or some of you may know him as Solo Shed Hunter on Instagram. Great shed hunter. Wanted to get you on, find a little bit more about you. There's tons of great shed hunters. I mean, not every great shed hunter I feel like has, you have a really good following, but I feel like there's tons of people out there picking up great stuff and they're not necessarily 100,000 followers deep.
There's a lot of
We
them.
all love it though, the same,
Yeah.
I feel like, and everyone picks up quite a bit
There's
of
a lot
stuff.
of that don't even aren't even recognized on social media. I know a lot of guys that steer clear of that are
Yeah.
hunters. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's another reason why I created this platform in general, is just to talk to people about something we all enjoy.
Yeah.
So I wanted to bring you on. Tell us a little bit about yourself to kind of start out, and then we'll dive into some combo.
Yeah. So I'm Charles Chuck McFarland, shed hunter. I've been shed hunting. I got into shed hunting as a really little kid. I got really lucky. I grew up in an area that there's deer and elk and mountains everywhere, and my dad took me on a family picnic, and I ended up finding this gigantic, 106-inch non-typical muley shed just wandering around on a picnic one day, and it kind of sparked an interest for me in shed hunting. And then, I'm now 38 years old and still shed hunt just about every single year. I've got kids that are shed hunters and family members, and that's kind of, I'm almost more leaning now toward, I love hunting. I love archery hunting. I love hunting itself, but shed hunting is almost more of an enjoyment to me than anything else. You know what I mean? Yeah. Something about the springtime in the mountains is hard to beat, dude. Hard to beat.
It is. It's such a good time. I feel like the weather's great. Finding antlers is icing on that cake.
Yeah, little green grass popping up and then a big brown horn laying there on this hillside somewhere.
And I feel like sometimes too there's less pressure, because with the hunting seasons, I don't know how other people are, but I feel like I put a lot of pressure on myself to fill tags, So
yeah.
When you get into the spring and start running around the hills for antlers, and you're kind of able to cover some ground, or maybe somewhere you want to look and see if there's anything there, it's kind of a good time to get out there without really disturbing it. It's not right before the season, so it's a good thing to scout a little bit or find antlers.
Yeah. It's getting more popular though. It's getting fairly competitive, almost like the hunting world now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's a because of things like this, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, it's becoming a mad dash the 15th of April. At least here, I don't know where I go. Holy cow, it's crazy, man. There's a lot of people nowadays. Yeah.
Do they have? I'm not super familiar with Wyoming. Do you guys have a shed season, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I'm not super familiar with Wyoming regs, so I just moved here about a year ago. Right, I've spent originally from Idaho. I grew up in Idaho, and then moved to Utah like in my early 1920 for work, and then I lived in Utah for 15 years, 16 years now. And so I'm mainly from Utah, or no shed hunting Utah, and I've just moved out to Wyoming. But yes, Wyoming does have shed closures, and they're doing some things now where it's like residents get an extra week. You know what I mean? Like they get to start a week early versus non-residents. There's a lot of things going on in the shed hunting regulation world that are kind of, you look at it, you're like, God, what's happening here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of some weird politics.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, to me, this is my personal opinion, but I think that the Fish and Wildlife and everybody else is kind of understanding how massive it is, right? Like how many of us go out there? There's freaking hundreds of thousands of us that tromp around the Rocky Mountains in the West looking for elk antler, right? Realizing that, and they're starting to impose regulation on it. They have to, because there's so many of us, but it's also a money game, in my opinion. Yeah, but
that is interesting. Yeah, I can't win them all. I feel like there's just so many different things going on. Even we don't have shed closures here in Arizona, but recently we had a spot that we've been hunting for several years, my buddies and I, and not necessarily shed hunting. They're like this, it's a trust land, but then the city's doing some stuff with the roads around there and trying to limit access, which would be fine, but they're kind of not doing, I don't know, they're doing it in a weird way where it's like they're
Yeah.
scraping the road so you can't go into these places, but then allowing you to go into other places, and then they want it roadless. But if you're allowing access in one point, it just defeats the purpose. So it's kind of like an ongoing issue, and we're like
Yeah.
just discovering this. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of states that are kind of facing that now, just in the new age of everything, right? With the increase of people and exposure and all that. All of these states are kind of facing, they have to start making some sort of change because there's getting to be too much activity and too much things happening and too whatever. So they are having to do their job, but nobody really knows what they're up to. You know what I mean? They're just kind of doing it. And then all of a sudden now, bam, there's a shed closure. And you're like, what happened? Why are we locked out? It's kind of, I don't know. I don't know enough about it to speak that intelligently about it. There's a lot of things happening that I didn't know were happening until they've happened. And that's
Exactly.
not sportsman to have that happen to you where things that were a certain way for the last 20 years and now all of a sudden they're changing. You kind of have a say, I guess, but not the say that you should have, in my opinion. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd like to get some biologists and some people from like Game and Fish on here one day and chat with them and see what kind of
Yeah.
information, stuff that maybe everybody else doesn't know, maybe.
I think that'd be super valuable for people. There's a lot of stuff that like ignorant guys like myself that don't know what's happening, right? But because it's hard, it's fairly limited shared. It's shared, via Fish and Game newsletter or whatever. You know what I mean? Most guys don't see that stuff. At least I don't.
Some of that information just doesn't make it out like it should in certain corners of importance, I would say. But
Yeah.
interesting to think about. But I would definitely like to get somebody on here to talk about that. So that's something I'll start working on actually, because I've been thinking about that. I'm like, who can I get on? Maybe
I've
somebody from Arizona, but
yeah, I met a couple of people a couple of people that are doing like some shed hunting studies in the wine area that work closely with fish and wildlife and biologists, and they have some very interesting talking points. They're very interesting people to talk to and hear kind of their opinion and what's happening and why the fish and wildlife is doing certain things and weed closures, and you know what I mean. It's an interesting subject to talk about.
do they seem kind of biased towards the closures or kind of neutral?
I don't know. I've really only talked to two people.
Okay.
One
Yeah.
one was totally unbiased. She was doing kind of a study about shed hunters and just trying to figure out kind of how many of us there are and when we're out and all this stuff. And the other guy I talked to, he was yes and no. He was there's really good reason for yes, we should have them, but then also he was like everybody else, and like, hey, when you have a closure, you have a lot of poaching that happens. And if you can't mitigate the poaching, it does no good. It's really defeating the purpose. So he was both sides of the coin. It was pretty interesting conversation that I had with him.
As a hunter and following the rules as a sportsman, I mean, you can understand both sides, and most people don't have a problem with the closures when it comes to, like if it's truly like detrimental for wildlife.
Right.
But not every winter's the same, so it's not a one size fits all plan, so some winters may be different, others the same, worse, better. But at the same time, everyone I think can agree that adding to wildlife and helping them out. I guess the biggest thing for me is if you're putting on a closure kind of similar to what we're doing out here, if you're going to close something to shed hunting, then you shouldn't have other people going in there, whether it's hikers, bikers, stuff like that, because it's all the same. So limiting one person doesn't really make a difference when it's it's public land. Everyone should get the opportunity to use it. But if you're shutting it down for a single purpose, that purpose should apply to everybody versus just one single group,
Absolutely.
That's the only problem I have when it comes to that stuff. But again,
ever shed hunted a state that had a closure before?
I've shed hunted in Colorado, yes, but I was there like in the summertime, so it was after the closure, And then Washington had more area closure, so there were certain areas that were closed versus others. More like where the elk and deer like congregated, it was a wildlife feeding area in the winter.
Yeah.
So those areas would shut down, and then areas like outside of that were fair game, but a lot of those animals migrated into those areas anyways.
Right.
And then they would leave, at the right time, and then they would open it back up at a certain time. So not a ton of it, like not waiting at the gate for it to open, necessarily, but
Yeah.
enough to where I've seen a little bit of it.
I have kind of mixed feelings on it. I've had some of my best years ever when Utah had shed closures, right?
Mm,
But then I've also had some of the worst experiences ever where you've done your homework, you know they're there, and then you go there and then the morning of they're gone. They're there
yeah.
the day before, but then or the week before, and then they're gone the day before. So I have kind of mixed feelings about it. I think something has to be done. I really do. Like I think there's enough of us now, and I've personally witnessed enough. Like I don't know.
Shed poaching.
Yeah, and just like not good sportsmanship. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
guys going out way too early and running into a herd of bulls because one bull's dropped an antler or one buck out of 10 has dropped one horn and then it's a foot race because it's a 180-inch mule deer or a 360-inch bull and then it ruins it for everybody because then they
Yeah.
scatter and they're scattered across the entire goddamn mountainside and you have no idea where they're at and then trying to find them. It's
Yeah.
so I don't know. I have mixed. I don't overly love someone telling me what I can and can't do on public land, especially with
Hmm.
something that's not really their jurisdiction anymore. That animal has dropped that. It's not part of the animal anymore. It's like an artifact, I guess, or a just like a stick laying out there. What's the difference between up an elk horn, a white elk horn, and a stick? There's not a lot of difference in my opinion, but I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it, but I do think something's got in the near future, and hopefully it goes our way and not the government way, and we lose out on some of our stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's also just only one of the issues I have with when you give them an inch, they take a mile, kind of. So that's
Yeah.
the only like give or take that I have where it's kind of like, I mean, we have to tread lightly because the more you give them, the
Yep.
more we're going to lose in the end. And
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't want to see hunting go away or shed hunting, obviously, but
Yeah.
if
It could.
who knows where it goes, it just,
Yeah.
obviously we want the wildlife population to continue and if it can help populations, and obviously most hunters are all for it. So,
Yeah.
who knows? Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. It's an interesting. I don't know. It's an interesting topic to me. Like, is shed hunting going to be the hunting now? Like where you got to buy a tag, where you got to put in
You got to
because
get drawn.
right because we're slowly moving there.
I just don't think that just wouldn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make
Yeah,
sense, but it makes sense to me anyway, to them as a
yeah.
profit, right? It's a way to make money. It's a way to generate conservation dollars if you have to buy a $20,
Permit to do it.
right? And then it's pretty easy to go from that to,
Someone's gonna listen to this, and then they're gonna be like, "That's a great idea."
oh God, yeah, yeah, right. Some senator, next thing you know, there'll be a bill getting passed in Colorado. Yeah.
Oh no, man, that wouldn't be good. But
No.
I mean, I can understand how it would generate dollars. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just
I,
no.
I'm really,
That's a tough one. I would hope there's some big enough people or enough people to kind of push back on that, or at least, and
yeah,
and find some sort of middle ground. I mean,
yeah,
that's the biggest thing is just we can understand both sides of it, of the like argument there, but if we can find some sort of middle ground, then I
right,
mean,
right.
maybe most people will be happy. I'm sure you can't satisfy everybody, but
Do you think that the battles we're having right now is like that? That's that moment. That's that battleground of who's going to get what. Because that's what I feel. I feel that like the battle over shed closures and road closures and all of that stuff is kind of the pivotal moment of the industry, right? Whatever industry you're in, that's
mhm.
the beginning of rules, regulations, things coming down the pipe, right? And so how do we figure out our way through that? How do we navigate this closure and whatever your situation in Arizona or Wyoming where they're making rules about residents and non-residents now? You know what I mean?
I would think that hard data would be the best. If there's people out there researching it, I would hope that there would be people researching both sides of it to understand winter kills, understand. Obviously, we have cycles when it comes to winters and different things. So if we can mitigate certain losses in some winters, the more loss we can prevent, the better. But weather's a huge factor we can't control, right? So I would think that hard data, maybe 5 to 10 year studies of the past and the future, like, would be a good indication to help formulate some of those rules and regs. But also in real time too, I think, what are people doing? Because like you said, most people are going to follow the rules, but then people who are going to poach, whether it's animals or sheds, are going to do it regardless. So and they're doing it whether we know it or not. Some people have proof of it. Oh, I seen the shed and now it's gone. But in most cases, most people probably don't even know about it, so it's kind of like, what can you do about stuff like that? It's a double-edged sword, because we have some of the things going on here is just like disagreements about archery tag quotas and different things. And I've heard both sides of that story. It comes down to, where's the data? We're the sportsmen. We want to see that information. What type of things is Game and Fish finding on surveys? What type of stuff? How accurate are the harvest surveys? How accurate is the Game and Fish surveys when they're doing aerial surveys for buck to doe ratios, because sometimes what they post online isn't necessarily what you see in the field. So, I mean, I'm not a biologist. That's not my corner. So I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, because I do love to get out and do it. But I definitely would like to go to other states and be able to pick up sheds and not have an issue.
Yeah, I think data's the thing. And that's kind of why, that's one of the things that I'm trying to do with Shed Happens, with this app that I've been trying to build. It's a data collection tool. If anything, like, it's cool that you can, right now we're not cool yet. We're still building and trying to figure out how to get AI to accurately measure antlers. We can estimate certain antlers. It's all based on your data sets, what antlers you've trained on, and I'm only one guy, so we've trained on like 3,000 antlers is all, which is a very small drop in the bucket when it comes to antler.
And now I just want to back up, because that was something I did want to talk about. So explain a little bit more. Just, I've seen a little bit of it, obviously, but maybe not everybody has. So explain, just like you were mentioning, it's a tool that you're introducing to measure antlers, but just dive into it a little bit more, where it's at, what it is. And then I do want to circle back around to what you were just saying when you're talking about training on antlers and kind of what your process is there.
So about 2.5, 3 years ago, I got kind of a harebrained idea. My son, my ex-wife, and I all kind of came up with this idea. We were trying to solve the problem of like, how do you start a shed hunting organization similar to Boone and Crockett? Right? How do you build one of those? And one of the biggest issues that we could see is, like, how do you scale that? How do you measure everybody's antler if they're in Iowa or they're in Arizona? Like, how do you
officially score it?
And actually score the antler. And my ex-wife at the time just throws out, well, why don't you build an app? And it kind of like just light bulb bing. I'm like, well, can we? And we decided to try it, right? Like, is there an app that measures antlers? And there wasn't. So we went down this big path of trying to figure out how we could build a mobile application that could measure antlers without a tape measure. Right. And what we came up with was using artificial intelligence. We partnered with the Ron Hulse. I don't know if you're familiar with many like antler buyers or the antler market, like buying and selling market, but Ron Hulse he's the world's largest antler buyer, and he lives in Buell, Idaho. And the amount of antler in this guy's shop is freaking astounding. He literally cuts up 30,000 pounds of antler every single month. With like 30,000 pounds is a lot, right? That's a 8x12 trailer load times 5 of antler. You know what I mean? A pile of antler. And so anyway, we told him about it, and kind of I had already started it. Like I'd owned a small welding business that I had a little bit of equity in, and I decided, well, let's go for trying to build this app. Let's see if we can build a mobile application that can measure antlers. And so I threw some money at it, and we got started. And then Ron decided he would be gracious enough to partner with us, and he supplied us with antler and helped us get through the build. And we've gotten to a point now, we we have a physical product. We have a mobile app that you can go download. We're only on the iOS platforms right now. We were on Google for a while, but Google's a little harder to figure out than iOS as far as app development and deployment and all that fun stuff. So we've since we're only on iOS now, but you can go download a mobile app that basically it's free to use. You just download it, you can sign up for it, and then you can start to score antlers using your cell phone camera. All you do is there's some requirements because of how we trained AI and how we went about with teaching AI what an antler was and how to properly score an antler. It requires like a black background and decent lighting and the photo taken kind of in a pretty specific manner, right? It's got to be kind of facing in a certain direction. And if you put it on a solid black background and you have good lighting, you can snap a picture of a shed antler and it'll spit you out a scorecard that gives you basically every Boone and Crockett measurement or any other measuring system that you like. It's really bare bones. Like we don't do deductions. We don't do any of the net gross thing. It's if it has a scoreable point, it will recognize it and it will measure it and then it adds it up for a total score, basically, right? Because I'm not, I don't know, I'm not sold on the net gross thing. Like nets are for fish. If it grew it, you should score it, in my opinion. Right? Like if I get why they do it, like I understand the reasoning because there is so many entries and you have to be able to a way to like whittle down who's the biggest, right? I get that. But to me, if it's got 13 points, it's got 13 scoreable points and you shouldn't minus because of that, right? So our AI system will recognize, is it a whitetail, is it a mule deer, or is it an elk? And then once it's established that, we've gave it pretty specific parameters of, okay, this is a tine 1, this is a tine 2, this is where you take the mass 1, mass 2, mass 3, all of the measurements that you normally take. And then it will go through and then it'll populate a scorecard for you. And it'll tell you, tine 1 is X, tine 2 is Y, so on and so forth, and then spit you out a total score. And like I was saying, we have a product, but we're not, I'm a measuring freak by trade. I grew up in the construction world as like a pipe fitter, pipe welder. I take really good pride in knowing that I know how to pull really good measurements. Like if I tell you something's 17 and a half inches, by God, it's 17 and a half inches. But my app isn't there yet because of training. Mainly my data set's not big enough and users and their ability to take the right photo, we're not super accurate yet. I have a bunch of training data that I post on the Shed Happens training page within the app. Everybody within our app can go see other people's antlers that they've uploaded, kind of like a social media, but it's not really intended for that. It's really intended for AI training. You can see within certain ranges of antler, for example, on an elk antler between a 280 class bull and like a 340, 350 class bull, we're pretty accurate. We're plus or minus 3 inches on a total score, which is like a gross estimate, right? Like you could estimate that bull's a 330 class bull based on our app measurement that it gives you. It's not dialed into the nearest eighth, the nearest 16th, the nearest whatever. It's more of just kind of a gross generalization, like, oh, that's a 180 inch mule deer, or that's a 360 inch, 350 inch bull type of thing. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
so
that makes sense.
We're getting closer. The more data we feed AI and the more tools that come out, because technology changes daily, right? Like the machine learning algorithms and the photo vision things that they use to look at the antler and to extract data out of, all of that shit is progressing so fast. Our developers can barely keep up. It's like, oh, hey, this new YOLO 7 came out and it's a thing that looks at the photo and it can actually see parts that aren't there. Like there's crazy stuff happening in the AI world. So we're trying to play catch up and we're feeding antlers and we're using new tools. I think we're going to get really accurate one day, right? Like I think eventually one day it'll be more accurate than a person measuring an antler, because what I've learned through measuring thousands and thousands of antlers, you may measure an antler at 179. I'm going to measure it at 183 or 182. It depends on exactly where you cut the antler when you put your tape on. It depends on, do you round up to the nearest 16th, or do you round to the second, to the eighth, to the quarter, right? All of that stuff really matters when you have 10, 11, 12 different measurements. If you round
Mm-hmm.
to, like, for example, if you round to a quarter inch and I round to a 16th of an inch, we may be off 2 inches just because there's 12 or 14 measurements. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Depending on which way you're rounding and which way I'm rounding. And so I think AI is a possibility of getting rid of that, and we'll know, okay, that's a 175-inch antler. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Almost kind of like a water displacement type thing. There
Mm-hmm.
won't be any room for error at that point. Once it's seen enough of them, and once it really understands all the variations and tines and points and configurations and all of that, I think AI will get to be more accurate than we can measure.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of what we're going with, is to get to that point one day to where anybody with a cell phone can just, there's a buck walking out in the mountains, and you got your phone scope, snap a pic of him in your phone scope, and then we can know, okay, that's a 175 to 180 inch mule deer walking around. And the reason I want to do that is because that's a data point. I know exactly where that deer was. I know exactly how big he was. We could potentially do, I don't know if this is possible because I haven't started this, but you could potentially do age classification.
Mm-hmm.
Does that look like a 6-year-old buck, a 5-year-old buck, whatever?
Once it sees enough of them, you mean, too? Like, to be
Yeah,
able to classify
right.
facial features and
Yep.
body.
Body size and all of the different ear size, all the things that go into how a guide can look at, like, because a guide can look at a buck and he can tell you, okay, I'm guessing that deer is a 175-inch mule deer. I think he's like a 9-year-old. You go
Mm-hmm.
shoot it, it's 177 inches and it was 8.5. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
a human can get really close at estimating what these deer and elk are based off of
Mm-hmm.
experience, based off of what they've seen in the area, all that stuff. I think we can teach computers how to do that for us and then compile it into a giant data set. If you were to
Mm-hmm.
scale and you had users across like, just say one state, you had enough users in one state to build a map of, okay, there's this size of deer in this area, this size of deer in that area, this size of deer in that area. You would know when people are out. You would know all of these different data points that we could use to manage our deer herd with, right? Or our
Mm-hmm.
elk herd or our sheep herd or whatever herd you're trying to manage.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of a tool. Like, it's a cool feature that you can measure something and you can know what your buck is, but in all reality, it's a data point.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know what I can use that data to help try to get better with our management of our elk and deer population. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Because I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I grew up in the early 2000s when deer and elk were everywhere, at least in the state that I grew up in. In the area that I grew up in, dude, it was insane. The amount of deer that would come down out of the timber and into the foothills in the winter range. Like, we would have 13, 14 brown horn days where you'd go pick up 13, 14 brown deer horns. Now you go to the same spot and you're lucky to pick up two or one.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see it. It feels like it's getting worse. Somebody's got to do something. We got to figure out how we're going to manage the deer with the current population and the current hunting pressure and all the things. Technology, man. Why are we still doing things in the Stone Age? Our fish and game
Mm-hmm.
flies around in helicopters and makes a somewhat wild guess. I mean, it's fairly, like, it's calculated. It's a calculated guess, but it's a goddamn guess. Like, do you know how
Mm-hmm.
they calculate the deer and elk populations?
Based on like a percentage of what they're seeing in a small
Yeah.
area, or
Yeah, so they'll fly a spot, they'll count X amount of deer or whatever species they're counting that they
mm-hmm.
see, and then they have an assumption that there's, X to the two above and beyond that they missed. Well, how do you know that? Like, maybe there's
Yeah.
only that many that are out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I said, it's calculated, but it's a calculated guess.
Yeah.
It's not science. It's not that there's really 300,000 deer in the state of Idaho. We don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
We got an estimation, but we have no real idea of how many deer are actually out there. You just
Mm-hmm.
don't because of how we count them. We can use things like this, in my opinion. There's tools like this, like Onyx, like Scout to Hunt, all these other tools that we can start to collect data from.
Mm-hmm.
We can get Onyx pin data of antlers that people have picked up and how many they have found and what age class. All that kind of data could be used to get a better understanding of how many we really got. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of the big picture and the big scheme of why we decided to do it was like, well, we could potentially make a difference. We could give a little bit of information to somebody that can make the right decision with it. You know what I mean?
I don't know if anyone's going to want to turn over their pins.
Well, I don't think that's what you got to do. I don't think you have to give them that. I think you can build it in a way like because everybody, at least not everybody. I give Onyx my pin. Onyx knows every badass spot that I've ever been to in my entire life. They know where all
Yeah.
my big antlers have been. They
Yeah.
know where I've killed bulls. They know where my wallows are. They know everything, right?
No, I get what you're saying though. That's a lot of data. That's a lot of good information that probably more accurate than just an aerial survey because it's also boots on the ground and it's proof that X amount of sheds are picked up. So then even from that data, while it may not be entirely accurate either, but it's more than a guess. It's a solid like this 4 point
Yep.
brown shed was found here and a 4 point shock was here. So you
Yep.
can rule out what's what and what's most accurate and most current and possibly string together some more data to tack on to an aerial survey for better estimations
Yep.
and better management policies maybe.
Exactly. Because I get to thinking, like, who spends the most time? Does the fish and game spend more time in the field than us sportsmen?
No.
Absolutely not. Right? There's millions of hours that us sportsmen spend in the woods every single year. Probably have just as good as an idea as they do of how many we got. Especially if you get into like real small rural communities like say in Idaho, the guys that have been hunting that place for 30 years know way more about it than the biologist down in the big city that flies up there twice a year, right? The guy
Mm-hmm.
that's out there shed hunting every year, he's setting traps, he's scouting bulls, he's summer scouting. Like that guy knows how much animals and how much he has to work with. We should start collecting data from that guy. Give us what you know so we can compile that as sportsmen. We know what's going on, or at least we have an idea.
Mm-hmm.
Then we can give that to the fish and game. Go, this is what we're seeing. You're telling us X, but we're seeing Y. What's
Mm-hmm.
going on? Where's the disconnect? How do we fix this problem? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and on top of just like game animals in general too, like elk, deer, moose, we're also seeing a lot of in the field, see a lot of coyotes, mountain lions, bears, foxes, bobcats. I mean, you see a lot of other stuff as well,
Yep.
that also plays a part in that system,
Yep. Yep.
whether good or bad,
Right. Right. And
So,
we're seeing that as sportsmen. And so that's kind of the dream is like let's figure out some sort of technology that can group all of us together so we can
mhm,
better understand what is going on and how are we going to manage this so my kids get to go hunting. I don't know if you have
mhm,
kids, but I that's one of my biggest things is I've got a 3 year
mhm.
old daughter that I'm a little nervous about shed hunting. Is she going to get to just go? And is she going to get to just go do it, or is she going to
Yeah,
have to buy a permit and wait for her chance to go? And you know what I mean? That
yeah,
kind of stuff I think about, and I want to try to help that problem in some way.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
So your goal kind of moving forward is just only to improve and
Yep.
collect more data enough to where it just gets better and better. And I feel like AI is still so new
Yeah.
from what I've heard, and just kind
Yep.
of different things too, is
Yeah.
just
It's
the
baby.
amount of information itself is learning at the moment with everybody. I mean, if you think about it, everything that everyone's asking or using it with, it's
Yep.
also building its own data collection. So everyone that's asking it how to do this or how to do that or what to do about this or explain this, I mean, every single one of those is also its own data point and its own
Yep. Training set
And
it gets to use.
yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy
So,
stuff, man. AI.
and I heard within several years, I mean, it itself has going to improved over itself, like that. It's kind of more in its lower like toddler stages, where in the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be more of like a college level. Although it's very, very smart, it's like it's just that it's so smart now, and that's just where it's at. And then in 5 to 10 years from now, it itself would have learned so much that it's just going to be that much better, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, yeah, and it happens fast. Like I say, like with I'm not really from this world. Like I said, I'm like by trade. I've been in construction my whole life. I've
Yeah.
been in the field as a pipe welder, and now I've moved into more of like corporate management type stuff. But I'm not really from the AI tech space. But
Hmm.
just in the short time that I've been here, it's already changed significantly. Like all of the tools that we first started with are completely extinct and nobody uses them no more. And
Hmm.
that's only been 2.5 years ago. And it's just like
Hmm.
that. The first stuff was kind of cool, but this new stuff is like, holy cow, you can do that with that, and it can do this, and it knows that. And you're just like, and how you train it and how it learns. Like, there's games that it plays with itself. You give it a data set, and then it'll go do it, do the task you're asking it. It'll grade itself. If it grades itself badly, it will like penalize itself. And then if it does good, it'll give itself a reward. So it tries to learn how to get smarter and what things to focus on. And like, it's insane, man. It's
Hmm.
insane what AI is capable of already.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is. I ask it to do a whole lot of things all the time
me too.
when
Me
I'm working
too.
on certain things or helping me,
Yeah,
even sometimes editing
yeah, yeah,
some of the wording and stuff just to get
yeah,
it right and make it flow better, you know?
yeah.
It's just a useful tool more or less. If I would ask somebody else to edit a paper, it's just simple.
And it does it instantly. Yeah, that's the cool part. Yeah, I use it frequently in my day job. Like I do a lot of
Yeah.
like document preparation, right? Like
Uh-huh.
building scopes of work and invoicing and different things like that. And it's invaluable. Like it'll take a task that would have taken me 8 hours to accomplish. It'll do it in 30 seconds. However long it takes me to write the queue and I tell it what to do. You've told it what to do, man, it just whips it right out and wham bam, you're done. You know what
That's
I
pretty
mean?
well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Back into like a little bit of your origination with shed hunting.
Yeah.
You said you originally started in Idaho and then went to Utah and now you're in Wyoming. So based on that and how everybody knows you, it's just the solo shed hunter out there grabbing a bunch of stuff across the board. Some of the things that you've learned along the way or that have kept you shed hunting, can you kind of dive into some of that?
Yeah. I would say the thing that's kept me shed hunting is the peace that it brings. Like
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
to me is the coolest part of shed hunting. Something about just wandering around, and for me by myself, like I love going out in the mountains and wandering around all day by myself and picking up
Hmm.
that antler. That's really what's kept me going in shed hunting, is just that fact. Like if I need some peace and quiet, I need to clear my head, I need to think about things, that's what I use shed hunting for, is
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. Tips, I would say don't tell anybody your favorite spot unless he's family or your best friend. I've learned that the hard way, that it is competitive now. It's very competitive. There's a lot of people out there doing it, and do your homework. Like do you use e-scouting a lot for picking spots? That when that came out, man, that tool right there changed the game for people.
Hmm.
When things like Google Earth and Onyx came about, people started
Hmm.
learning that you could go scout areas and never be there,
Hmm.
that completely changed the game in shed hunting. I got a
Hmm.
witness. I'm just old enough that I got a witness just before that big craze and social media and all that. And then now, just the difference that it is. It's still
Yeah.
amazing and it's still the funnest thing that I get to go do every year. And I look
Hmm.
forward to it over anything, but it's changed considerably. There's a
Yeah.
lot more competition and you got to try a lot harder now. You know what I mean? Yeah.
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 When I first started hunting, yeah, I was using paper maps. I mean,
Yep.
and that was like a thing, you know, it was just like improving the paper maps, even, you know, there
Yeah.
was a bunch of different stuff. And then I got into using just the topographical maps, and kind of diving into that aspect and trying to really figure other things out. And I'm drawn to just wanting to learn more and more about whatever it is I'm doing, whether it's my work. I'm a nurse in the emergency room. So whether it comes to that, I want to learn everything I can because it improves me as a nurse, but then also the patients and their lives essentially. So, and then kind of naturally rolled over to any sport or anything that I've done growing up. I just wanted to know more about it and get better. So naturally dove into the e-scouting type of stuff and got into Google Earth, topo maps, just like paper maps. And then when the apps started coming out, I think even before I had Onyx or Scout to Hunt, I don't even know the name of it. It was some other GPS one that would do similar stuff, but it was a paper map loaded onto
Kind of like the
this.
old Garmin maps, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
similar to that type of stuff. Yeah, so it's like still paper style map. It wasn't like an interactive map as much as they are right now,
right.
or how improved they've become.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
e-scouting is huge. I feel like big time. You
yeah,
can take what you've learned about certain spots or certain elevations when you find sheds and apply those in other places and look at the difference between the hybrids is what I use probably the most. I really like a hybrid map, so I'm using that topo feature
yep,
mixed in with the like GPS imagery. Those two combined tell you a lot of information about what you're going to step into
yep.
and what features you're looking for.
Do you get into the 3D space much, like using 3D mapping?
I will, yeah, depending on what I'm looking at, or I'll pop on the 3Ds and turn it
Yep,
this way, this way. I
yep,
think I use those a lot for like glassing points that I'm looking for, or like adding on. Let's try to get here and
yeah.
look at what I'm gonna step into.
Yeah. I always what I tend to find myself doing is I'll do a very similar situation. I'll go with the hybrid map and I'll go scout an area based on elevation and area and whatever, and just kind of get a feel for it. And then once I've kind of established, okay, this looks like a general area where something might winter, then I go to the 3D and then I start looking for, slopes and benches and different corridors and places for them to travel. And oh, it looks like maybe they summer up here and then this is like their travel path and winter area and that kind of stuff. A lot of just driving around too, to be honest. Like I'll get an idea. I'll place a pin on Onyx or Scout to Hunt. It's like, okay, I'm gonna go check out this area, and then that's just kind of my generalization of where I go. I see that pin is just kind of like I want to head to that area, and then once I get down there, then it's a matter of driving or walking,
Mm-hmm.
depending on what kind of area you're in. But I spent a lot of time just driving around, glassing out the pickup. I'm like, oh, that looks good way out over there, or way across the canyon over there, and then you really start to kind of narrow down. I'm going to go on this hike tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It always
no,
starts really
that's
big, and then you just kind of keep narrowing and narrowing and narrowing until you find your spot.
I feel like that is what completes your e-scouting when it comes to taking that information and then using it
Yep.
in the field and going, okay, we started here. Maybe you don't find what you're looking for. Maybe you do. And
Yep.
then from there, you could maybe just be, well, I missed it by 2 canyons because something that maybe wasn't on the map I didn't realize, or whatever browse or feeds that's there, or maybe there's water there that's only there at certain times of the year.
Yep. Yep.
Some of that information, it just adds to the whole picture.
Yeah, I would say too, and I don't know how yours has been, but mine personally, when I do that, most of the time it's not like a total strikeout, but it's very rare that I just throw a pin at a map and then it just like happens to be the
Yeah.
greatest place you've ever been. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Pretty rare that happens. Most of the time, it's like I'm gonna go for a 4 hour drive, then a 10 mile walk, and I might pick up one chalk antler.
Sometimes that it may not work out that way, but sometimes that helps you scratch areas off the list too,
Yeah,
because sometimes areas look really, really good and it's just not. They're just
yeah.
not there
They're just
for whatever reason. They look perfect, but they're just not there. Like we talked about before, they just might be 2 canyons over or up higher or down lower. It just depends. But
that
for
hard.
whatever reason, it could just be something else there that you didn't realize. Like maybe the road, or maybe there's tons of people there that are pressuring them in and out, or whichever.
Yeah, that's a tough thing too. Like it's you never know. You might miss it by you might miss the right spot by a quarter mile. I had that happen in Nevada one year. I've only went to Nevada a couple of times for the shed
Mm.
opener, right? The first year I went, it was unbelievable to me. The first day, I think I picked up, they were all whites, but I picked up, I think 7, a bunch of little rag horns, and then like a 330, 340 class set, right? Last year's horns. I was like, oh shit.
Mm.
My cousins, there was like 5 of us. They all did really well. And then I ended up going to the kid that took us down there. He has a like a specific canyon that he goes up every single year, right? And it's like his
Mm-hmm.
spot. So he goes and hits it the first 2 days, and he did well. Like he found quite a few brown antler, nothing ginormous. And then our last day there, we didn't really, me and my cousin didn't really have a spot to go. And we asked this kid, we're like, hey, do you mind if we go to your spot? And he's like, no, dude. He's like, I cleaned it out, but if you guys want to go, go. I'm like, okay. We went up there, and as soon as we hit this, it's this big, long, like burned cedar draw. And as soon as we hit that ridge to where we could look into it, we sit down and I throw glass up, and within seconds, I was like, shit, there's one. And it was just like plain as day. There's this brown 6-point laying there. We were a long ways away. We were, I don't know, 1,000, 1,200 yards, something like that. And I never put
Mm-hmm.
spotting scope on it. I just did my binos. And I'm like, bam, there's one. So we go marching up there. Dude, it ended up being like 180-inch fucking brown single. It's a
Wow.
giant point brown elkhorn that was just laying there in the wide open. Like he must have walked. He told me he thinks he walked within like 30 yards of it, but he just
Mm-hmm.
walked right by it. That's the thing.
Especially when they're brown, sometimes they just don't
Yeah,
stand out as much.
even white ones, man. I've walked, tripped over them. Like those things are hard to see, and especially if
Yeah.
you happen to hit that spot and you're in a hurry and you're not really paying attention and looking around, you're just kind of looking where you're walking, you'll walk right by.
Yeah.
You know
Oh,
what I mean?
you look left and the shed's on your right.
Yep.
Yeah, it happens. Yeah.
I'm learning that now that it's getting so popular. I used to get really discouraged about boot tracks,
Yeah.
but now it's like they don't find them all. Like you're going to
No.
miss them. Like I don't care how good you are or how much you
Yeah.
grit it, you're still going to miss antler, and you'll find them laying there. You take a 5-foot different path and bam, you can see it, and
Definitely what keeps me going. Nobody can find them all, no matter what.
no matter.
Even the best guys are proof of that. The ones that are posting all kinds of stuff, if they come through and they're picking up a bunch of chalks, that's just information that shows you right there that not everybody can find them. So,
Yep, they get missed. See, and that's
yeah.
something I would love to know that number, right? Like how many are out there? How many did get missed? How do you figure that number out? How do you know that there was 300 bulls in one area, but they only picked up 50 of them? I bet it would probably discourage, or not discourage, but you'd probably feel a little bit dumb when you learn that you missed as many as you missed, because I think you
Oh,
missed
yeah.
a lot of them.
If everybody I've talked to in the past, probably in the future, in the present, we all miss them. Even stories I've heard with other guys saying the same thing. Somebody was already in there, and they go in there second, and they still pick up stuff. So it's
Yeah.
kind of cool. Like I said, what keeps me motivated to keep going is just there's always something laying on the ground out there. There's always something to find, is my little saying to myself.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. I've got some spots that are popular enough that there's quite a few people, quite a bit of pressure, right? And then I'll go
Mhm.
hit them. I'll go hit that same spot. I've got one spot in Utah that's pretty popular, but I always do really well in it. I'll hit it
Mhm.
2 or 3 times early in the spring, and then I'll go back around the fall because I like to go down there and bugle the same spot and mess around with
Mhm.
bulls. And I'll pick up
Mhm.
white ones. And it's like I walked right through here, and so did 5 other people, and we still missed them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's pretty cool
Yeah.
that there's that many of them out there.
Yeah. Or when you see boot tracks and you do turn off of them, boot tracks are going exactly where I wanted to go, and you just turn your path and maybe head in a different direction, and then you stumble into something. Sometimes those boot tracks help you. They
Oh,
send you on the right line sometimes, and you
yeah,
can't complain about that.
yeah,
You might initially be like, oh man, this is exactly where I wanted to go, but someone's already walked it, but maybe they walked it 2 months early and
right.
it just wasn't the right time.
Yeah, or one came in behind them. That's what's
Exactly.
cool about.
Sometimes tracks right over the top of your boot tracks.
That's the cool thing about shed hunting. There's a lot of variables, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of things that can happen at any given
Yeah.
time, and you never
Oh
know.
yeah.
I went into a spot that was overrun with people, and a really good shed hunter. The kid that went in there, he's not a beginner. This kid stacks bone, a lot of it.
Yeah.
He's really good at it. He's an outfitter. He knows his shit.
Yeah.
And he walked right past a 178-inch, it's a 16-pound antler. It's humongous. And he walked right by it. So
Yeah.
it keeps the guy going when you know that kind of stuff.
I've walked past sheds I've found later, definitely. And I look back at your Onyx or your Scout to Hunt and you run those little tracks and just see just how close. I've been as close as like 10 to 15 yards or even like 50 yards in one of the most recent ones that I picked up. It was like 53 yards. I walked 6 months ago and then I just found one the other day.
Yeah.
You can walk right by it, but you're on a different mission that day. So
Yep.
yeah, it works.
For sure.
Aside from some of the e-scouting obviously being a pretty huge tool, have you noticed any consistencies across the board when it comes to areas or feed sources or anything in particular that draws animals like elk or deer to it?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I hunt. I go in kind of a pretty wide variety of areas, right? It could be southern Utah is considerably different than northern Wyoming or
Yeah,
southern
definitely.
Idaho. But I have noticed,
Yeah,
like,
that's true.
I don't know if it's just me, but I've noticed when I go to places that are like great big mountain, it's like one big mountain. There's a lot of them. There's the Boulder Mountain and Beaver Mountain and like all these just giant mountains. And it's not necessarily one big mountain, but it's a big mountain range or whatever.
Yeah.
If you can find like a pocket, like a bowl where elk and deer winter or summer and fall up on this mountain range, if you can find some sort of pocket that gets them out of the storms, out of the weather, out of the
Out of the
stuff,
wind.
yeah, they
Yeah.
can go tuck down in somewhere and live all winter. I do really well in those places, really well. And then I've been doing really well on north sides lately. It used to be 10, 20 years ago, South Slopes were like the thing, right? Everybody goes to the South Slopes. Well, now everybody's on the South Slopes. Elk and deer still got to travel and move, and they're traveling through North Slopes. Man, I find a lot of antler in deep, deep North Slopes where they're crossing and they're going from one ridge to the next. A lot of
Interesting.
guys will
Yeah.
just bomb right through that stuff or not glass it. Yeah, I spend a lot of time glassing north sides in the snow and just
Interesting.
following game trails, looking
Yeah.
for beds, looking for trails. And when you find them, sometimes you'll find a brown antler just chilling right there in the snow.
Those are great pieces of information. Even when it comes to just finding animals in general, most people think south facing slopes, but a lot of times, yes, they're going to try to get in the sun, but like you said, they could go to those little pockets where maybe it's still facing north, but it's got everything they need, so they don't have to move far.
Bulls are weird too, from my experience. Like bulls love snow. They love deep, nasty stuff. You'll see them in the mornings and afternoons. They'll be grazing out on these south slopes, but then when they go bed, they're going to go bed either right on the ridge or they're going to go around onto that north side where they're cooler, they're out of the wind, they're not visible, they're kind of laying in timber. I find a lot of antler like right as you come into a timber north slope where they're bedding. I find a lot of antler in spots like that.
That makes sense. We were watching a bunch of bulls in November on a late archery hunt, and I feel like they'd be out on, and it was like a south facing slope, but still they were out on this like edge just feeding and feeding, and then before the sun would even come up, man, they would just beeline straight for this big thick patch of timber right at the top of this really high mountain. It was nice and open feed, and then they would just head right up there and just disappear into that timber. I was telling my buddy we need to come back and check on these bulls later and see if they're still hanging out here, and then walk that timber patch up there whenever they start clearing out in the summer. Like you said, they're not necessarily just going to fall off right where, yes, they're spending most of their time there, but they're also spending a lot of time bedded down and trying not to burn energy. So they're going to drop sheds in those places as well. Just overlooked places.
Yeah.
I would say is the biggest thing there with that piece of information you gave.
Yeah. I've been doing fairly well around closer to the roads than I used to be. Something that I've learned now, the competition has gotten to be everybody's a Cameron Haynes and everybody's hopped up on pre-workout and they're marching 30 miles. That's kind of the game now. It's a young man game and these guys are doing 20-mile days and stuff. Dude, I do pretty dang good within a mile of a road, right? They get there and they just immediately just blast through that and they're headed to the south slope that's 4 miles up the ridge. It's like, well, there's elk here too. And there's elk in this area. I found a lot of antler near roads lately. My cousin, I swear to God, that kid's probably found more road sheds than most people have found sheds.
Really?
Everywhere that kid goes, he'll just be driving along. I'm like, oh yeah, picked up a 4-point muley horn out the window. I'm like, dude, Like, how do you see these things? So freaking good at
Yeah.
it.
I just feel like that's attributed to those pressure spots. The pressure pushes them into these little quiet areas where
Yeah.
they're probably just sitting there watching people drive by. They don't even have to get out of their bed because they know. And
Yep.
they obviously can hear, see, smell, but they just listen to people hoof it on out of there.
Yep. 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 For sure. For sure.
I feel like that's all just great information with your app and stuff too. I hope that stuff comes alive and comes along further and gets to measure. And I do have some, maybe I'll have to download it and get some sheds, some data on there for
Yeah.
you too.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
For some of these like coos deer antlers,
Oh, cool.
they're
Yeah.
still little whitetail
Yeah.
ones,
Just
but they're still like
similar.
a
Yep.
little like basket racks and stuff, so
Yeah. Yeah.
it'd be cool to add some more data to the piece. But I just want to start kind of wrapping it up here anyways. I do want you to let everybody know where everyone can follow you, where everyone can download your app if they want to get on there and try it.
Following stuff, like I'm not huge into the social media thing.
Yeah,
Like, I don't know. I'm a working guy, so I'm on there when
yeah,
I can.
definitely.
But Solo Shed Hunter on Instagram, Charles McFarland on TikTok, and
Mm-hmm.
then ShedHappensLLC.com, and then you can find all the stuff about the app. There's some really cool stuff on there that I didn't really get to talk about. We not only do that, I also make 3D replicas with our app,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh yeah, I did see that.
I'll text you
Yeah.
some of them. Like I can text you a link that you can. It's like a 185-inch muley buck in your space, and set it on
Yeah.
the desk or whatever. But there's all that stuff's on the website, Shed Happens
Mm-hmm.
LLC. They can go check it out. You can get to the app stores from there and all that fun
Yeah,
stuff.
I've seen that, and it works in real time basically too. So have your camera out and looking at whatever
Yep.
surface you pointed out, and you could probably even compare that to what you're looking at and be able
Yep.
to help learn how to field judge.
Yep. Yeah, that was kind of the point. I don't have a ton made so far. We've got some big muleys, quite a few elk, some giant elk
Mhm.
sheds. I've got a couple that are like monstrous. My antler buyer is kind of an antler collector too, and
Mhm.
he gave me like a 190-inch brown single that is just ginormous. Like it's had like a 63-inch main beam. Like he's huge.
Wow, to see stuff like that, yeah, is insane.
Yeah, and that's what's kind of cool about it. It's like you can put that on your wall, and you're like, oh my god, it's that tall. It's like
Yeah.
shit. That's how big an elk antler can be.
Yeah.
That's what I think is really cool about the 3D replica space is that thing.
Yeah. I feel like that's a good point because also in the field, I feel people get very set on numbers. Oh, I want to kill this
Yeah.
or that. Yes, everybody's entitled to hold out for whatever they want. But then when they see something that they get excited about and they shoot it and then you measure it, sometimes it's always smaller than what you think.
That's the problem with the judging by number thing that we all
Yeah.
do, right? That score thing. Like I have an app that scores antlers, and I don't overly love the whole score. Yeah, I got to kill a 200-inch buck. Like I hate that. That's not what it's
Yeah.
about. It's about
Yeah.
killing the deer you want, whether he's
Yeah.
200 or he's 160. It's the deer
Yeah.
you want. That's
Whatever excites you. I definitely would like to kill a 200-inch deer.
me too. Yeah.
They're definitely not running around
Yeah. They're
like
not.
they used to be from what I hear, but
Yeah.
they're out there, I'm sure.
Yeah. So.
I appreciate you coming on and chatting with us and everybody for listening. Follow along with Solo Shed Hunter. And thanks again for listening to Shedcast. Follow, like, subscribe for more shed hunting information, news, interviews, tips, and tactics all coming your way. Thank you.